Welcome to our podcast on ionic bonding and naming. Before we get going, we're going to review what an ion is. Remember, an ion is an element that the electrons do not match the number of protons. So if we have a positive charge, we're going to call that a cation, and if we have a negative charge, it's going to be called an anion. So we have our sodium. Remember, it had a valence electron of +1. That means it wants to get rid of one electron. So there's actually going to be one more protons than there are electrons. So we're going to have a +1 charge on our sodium. Chlorine, on the other hand, has 7 valence electrons, so it wants to gain a electron. That means it's going to have one more negative charge than positive charges. So it's going to have a -1. So, in ionic bonding is where one element is going to steal the electrons from another element. So an example here is sodium chloride. Sodium has a valence electron of 1. Chlorine has its 7 valence electrons. Chlorine is actually going to want to steal that electron from sodium to make sodium chloride. With ionic bonds, they have a high melting point and a high boiling point. So that's why when I make boil water, I put salt in my water because it makes the temperature get even hotter because it has to raise the boiling point of the water. It is always between a metal and a non-metal. In sodium, this is the metal, the chlorine is the non-metal, and this makes a very strong bond. When we look at a sodium chloride molecule, they actually have a crystallized structure, and they are usually solids when they are bonded together. So ionic bonds, it's a stealing of the electrons. It is super strong, and it creates a high boiling point and melting point. It's also the reason why we put ice or salt out on the icy roads, because it freezes that, it raises that freezing point, and so it has to get colder in order for it to freeze. So here's 2 examples. We have magnesium chloride. Here's my magnesium. It has a +2 on it because it has 2 valence electrons. It wants to give those electrons away. And here's my chlorine. It's going to take those electrons. The chlorine is, it's going to steal them. So now my chlorine atom has 8 valence electrons. It's nice and happy. This one has 8. It's nice and happy. My magnesium doesn't have any, so it's good to go. Calcium chloride is another example. Calcium is at a +2. So both of its electrons get stolen by the calcium, or by the chlorine atom. Now when we name it, the metal is always going to be first. So on our periodic table, we drew a line on the right-hand side to differentiate the metals from the non-metals. Everything to the left of that is a metal. Everything to the right of that is a non-metal. So our metal is always going to be first. So our positive ions, those are our metals, are going to be first. So sodium is the sodium ion. Zinc would be our zinc ion. And then our negative ion is the non-metal, is always last, and we're going to change the ending to "ide." So O2, oxygen, is going to become oxide, and chlorine, that chlorine -1, is going to become chloride. So I could have sodium oxide, I could have sodium chloride, zinc oxide, zinc chloride. So the metal goes first, the negative ion goes second, with the ending changed to "ide." And here's 2 more examples. We have an aluminum with 3 chlorines. It is going to become aluminum chloride. We don't worry about how many there are. Magnesium and sulfur is going to become magnesium sulfide. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into ionic bonding and naming. Thank you.